It's Jenny Eliscu and Ed O'Brien on SiriusXMU, who is calling in from, it looks like it's kind of a little bit of a dreary day in Austin, Texas today, but we have the wonderful opportunity here to premiere a beautiful song by Ed that you're going to be hearing on SiriusXMU shortly. Ed, thank you so much for connecting.
Thank you for allowing me to connect.
So we're going to be listening to the newly revealed title track for an album you've also just announced today called Blue Morpho that's going to be coming out on May 22nd. So congratulations. Just I'm sure there's always a lot of feeling of build up when you know something's coming and it hasn't been announced yet. So it must feel like a relief.
Yeah, it's funny. It's like I actually finished the record quite about a year ago, just under a year ago. So it's been gestating away. So yeah, I mean, it's one of those things until it's released, you think it's not going to be released. And there's something about releasing a record that is, you're finally letting go of this stuff. And it's good to get it out there. And, it allows you to move on as well, in a way. A released record is like releasing your children out into the world.
So we're going to be listening to the title track to Blue Morpho. Tell me a bit about this particular track and also how this group of songs began to come together.
Well, the group of songs sort of started to come together in about 2021. They came out of a sort of a quite dark period for me. But, one of the gifts and one of the beautiful things about being a musician and writing is that you can take these moments, these challenging moments in your life, and you can spin them into something beautiful. And I think that's really the essence of all these songs, and being in this dark place and actually going into nature. For me, a lot of my healing took place being in Wales and in the Welsh Hills where we have a home, and being with the birds and being on these mountains, in these valleys, in these woods, walking along these paths, getting in the river, getting into the sea. So that's where it's very rooted to this place. And Blue Morpho is, it's just one of these songs that's just evolved. I had the guitar riff-ish, I had a semblance of, again, one of the things on this record I was trying to do was get away from form. I was listening to a lot of jazz and I was being inspired by a lot of jazz, and I was sort of enamored by the way jazz, there is a form, of course, but it also, upon listening, it's not the classic verse, chorus, middle eight and out. And I guess Radiohead isn't either, but I was trying to sort of blur the boundaries of repetition and things that are played once, and Blue Morpho came from that, and it just sort of evolved. It's one of those songs I didn't really know, and until we recorded the first thing to go down was the acoustic guitar, and until we recorded it at that moment, I didn't know quite what the arrangement was, but we were quite relaxed about it. We saw what happened, and it flowed out, and that felt good, and so we work on that. And then one of the things I love about the track is that the strings were arranged by somebody that I met in Estonia. I emailed him and said, listen, do you fancy doing, he offered, he said, if you ever need any string arrangement, and he's a composer. And I emailed him and I said, yeah, actually, we've got a couple of songs. I sent it over to him and he said, I like this. It's in 5/4, which is the meter of the song. And normally when you do sort of string arrangements, you plot it out with the person arranging it. But what was lovely about this process, I just handed it over and he recorded it in Tallinn with a chamber orchestra there. So I had no idea what he was going to do. Part of my process now is just to let go. I was very inspired by stories of David Bowie. When David Bowie got musicians in, he sort of trusted in the way, in the path, and just, he might have directed them to a certain extent, but ultimately he got people in to do their thing. And that's what I did, and I sort of trusted in the process. I mean, it doesn't always work out, and I had that, but in this instance, it worked out beautifully, and so there's this beautiful string arrangement on it that I feel it just elevates the whole track.
Well, let's give a listen to Ed O'Brien's Blue Morpho, and we'll come back and talk a bit more. It's Jenny Eliscu and Ed O'Brien on SiriusXMU on this Tuesday, celebrating Blue Morpho, the title track to Ed's upcoming album, and the announcement of the album's arrival this spring. May 22nd is when it'll be out. Ed, earlier you were talking about this group of songs beginning with this feeling of something that you needed to work out. You were in a kind of a dark place, and that you turned to making music as a way to process. Did you find that it worked? Did making this album and making the songs in addition to all the other things you were doing, bring you comfort and help you to feel better?
Yeah, 100%. The music was like the icing on the cake, but more about the other stuff of like when I'm sure you and your listeners know about being in a dark place. It's a very human condition. And I found the benefits of just really sitting in it and breathing in that dark place in terms of just, there are reasons why we go to these dark places, partly having the time and the patience to figure it out. The body wants to heal ultimately. This is why depression and stuff happens. The body's saying enough is enough. Something's not working here. I have the very, very, very good fortune of not having to go to a job whereby I've got a boss, or I've got a job whereby I've got to, in order to pay my mortgage, I've got to go in there. Most people don't have that luxury. Most people have got debt. So that's where things like medication comes in order to cope with the daily, and I get it. I'll never be a judge of that. I have the good fortune of being able to sit in it. I don't want to medicate myself. I don't like doing that. I've tried it once and I just found that I wasn't myself. And again, I'm a real believer that if you give the body time and you give it attention and you're patient, the body will the body will guide you how it needs to be healed. And for me, it's like what feels good, what doesn't feel good. What feels good is being in cold water. What feels good is being in nature. Things that feed your soul, nourish your soul. What doesn't feel good? Oh, doom scrolling on social media. There's so many things now. And I think particularly in the age that we're living in, there are so many things that are sort of man-made and often linked to technology that really just are not good for our harmony. Whereas the natural world, that's where it is. And so for me, that comes first. That was the healer. But the music what's great about the music is that it's like a byproduct of that healing process. So, it's a document of that time. It's a document of certain songs like right in the middle of that dark period, and other songs you can hear and you're lifted out of that and you've been through that, you processed, you're in a sunnier place. So it would be wrong to say the music was the reason I healed, but I'm so blessed that it's an outlet for, we're all human beings are deeply creative, and I'm fortunate that I'm able to take those life experiences and somehow indirectly they sort of come out in the music.
I understand there's also Blue Morpho, the 3-act play, which is a short film in connection with the album that will be viewable as well. Tell me a bit about that and sort of where that idea came from.
Well, the idea came from the director, a guy called Kit Monteith, and he kind of heard the record and just, usually when you get a treatment for a film, which is kind of, the treatment is the thing that lays out what you're going to do. Usually sort of, if you're really lucky, 50% of it is kind of like doing, the rest is like, well, not that. But he really got an essence of what the music is. And so he wanted to do a sort of a day in the life of me in the place in Wales where I live and where I've recorded a lot of the songs. We filmed it over 2 days in January of this year, middle of January. Bleak, good bleak Celtic weather, grey, foreboding skies. And we wanted to get a sense of the music without saying too much. It's often with music, it's that funny thing is, people say, what's this music about? Well, ultimately, it doesn't really matter the reasons why I made the music. What really matters is how people hear it. And if you're lucky that they personalize it for themselves. So this is a way of getting the spirit and the feeling of the music without saying too much, hopefully. Just letting the images and the music sort of invoke the person who's watching it with a sense of the land and where it comes from. And then, you can fill in the rest of the blanks yourself.
We're gonna listen to a song next from your previous solo album, from the album Earth. And, I think it is noteworthy that you released that as EOB. And this is coming out. This is the first time you're putting out music under your full name as Ed O'Brien. What inspired you to actually just go for it?
Jenny, I'm not hiding anymore. When I went under EOB, I was hiding, and I that's part of this journey is that, and the hiding, why do people hide? Because they don't feel confident in fully stepping into what they're doing as them. I was definitely aware of, I'm stepping out of the Radiohead mothership. which is an extraordinary place to come from musically. Anything that I do is naturally going to be compared with where I come from. It's going to be compared with the beautiful work of Tom and Johnny and Philip and Colin. And I had deep, deep insecurities about me and about what I do. So in the process of the last 5 years, one of the things that has been fantastic is that I just don't care anymore. I don't care what people think of me, and it's so liberating. I just have to do it. And there are going to be people who don't like it. Of course there are. But hopefully there'll be some people who do like it. But either way, it doesn't matter anymore. I'm compelled to do this, and I'm blessed that I'm able to do this. So, I'll do this till the day I die. I mean, literally, that was one of the things on this record. I love the process of creating and the mystery and the uncomfortable nature of it and the conundrums and then these glorious moments. And I love everything that's in there. It's a deeply uncertain place, but it keeps you humble and it keeps you in a state of gratitude, really, I feel. So whether I release it or not, I will carry on doing this. And I just love it.
Well, listeners, we're going to get into a track from that EOB album, Earth, and the rest of Blue Morpho will be out in May. So otherwise, I would play some of that because there's so much great stuff on it. Absolutely gorgeous collection of music. So Ed, congrats on making it, and thank you for sharing it with us. And I can't wait for our listeners to be able to hear even more of the album. And the title track, in case you missed it earlier, we played Blue Morpho. That is online now, and you can look for the short film in the coming weeks. And thank you so much, Ed, for doing this.
Thank you so much, Jenny. Thank you. Lovely conversation.
All right, let's listen to Brazil on SiriusXMU.